In a remote northern city, a 52-year-old nurse goes missing from her home.
My gut's screaming. And I said, somebody else has done things in here.
Who might have kidnapped her and why?
It was sickening to think about.
To track her abductor, investigators use every forensic tool available. But the vicious assailant remains at large.
You just want to reach out and get hold of the guy.
He was trying to lure her into the car.
I just got shivers up and down my spine.
Will the monster who'd killed before kill again?
Nobody should die that way.
I've never seen anything that horrific.
One of the duties of a pathologist is to determine the cause of death.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required. Download Veely now.
Anchorage, Alaska. The largest community north of the 60th parallel is, in many ways, still a frontier town. A place that appeals to those in search of adventure, like 52-year-old Mindy Sloss.
Mindy was a very strong woman. She was very independent.
Mindy had moved to Alaska in the 1980s for what was supposed to be a short stay. More than 20 years later, she's still here and working as a psychiatric nurse.
My relationship with Mindy actually started as a coworker. We were both employed as nurses. We traveled around the States.
Jerry couldn't ask for a better workmate.
Mindy was very professional. She was very timely. If you weren't 5 minutes early for a meeting, you were late. She was very responsible. As far as a work ethic, most people give 100%. Mindy gave 110.
It wasn't long before Mindy and Jerry became best friends.
She would sometimes call me Mom. And it was because of the closeness that we sort of took care of each other.
And when Mindy took the hour-long flight from Anchorage to Fairbanks twice a month for work, Jerry took care of Mindy's cat.
Willie required medication. So when Mindy was gone, I would go over every day and give Willie his medicine.
The first week of August 2007 wasn't supposed to be any different.
I was expecting to get with Mindy before she left for Fairbanks, but I called Saturday and I left a message and she didn't call back. And so I sort of thought, well, she's busy doing things and getting ready to go.
Jerry continues to try and get in touch with Mindy all weekend, and she's not the only one. Mindy's longtime friend Bob Conway has also been trying to reach her.
I called her cell phone and I got to the voicemail box was full. And that just never happened. That's when I contacted Jerry.
He asked if I had heard from Mindy, and I said no, and she hadn't returned his calls. And that alarmed both of us, because of all the people in Mindy's world, she kept in touch with the two of us more than anyone.
I knew there was something really wrong. I didn't know which way to turn. I didn't know what to think. You don't know where to begin. You don't know where to look.
Early the following morning, Jerry heads over to Mindy's to feed the cat and have a look around the house. She's concerned by what she sees.
Mindy was very orderly. She was a little bit almost compulsive about how she liked her house to be and look. And basically the house looked as if she'd walked out the door and hadn't got ready for the week.
Jerry heads downstairs to give Willie his medication, but as she's leaving,
the door was extremely loose, so I got a screwdriver and tightened up the doorknob and shut it and locked it and went to work.
When Jerry gets to her office, she places a call to Fairbanks.
And her supervisor came on the phone and she said, Jerry, I'm a little concerned. Mindy didn't show up for work this morning. That hit my button.
So much so, she contacts police.
I was driving home and my sergeant called and said that there was a suspicious missing person case and asked if I could come back into the station and take a look at the case.
It isn't long before Pam is doing a walkthrough with Jerry of Mindy's home.
To me, the house did not look unusual.
There was no sign whatsoever of burglary.
She was a traveling nurse, and so she went out to the villages, and she had just beautiful carvings in her home, things that were, worth quite a bit of money.
And as a nurse practitioner,
she had medication in the house that would have been desirable to somebody that broke in. She had prescription pads.
none of it had been touched.
It just didn't look like somebody had come in to the home or that a struggle had happened in the home.
But it's the small things that have caught Jerry's attention.
Well, there were a bunch of bills on the table that were half made out. There was an empty bottle of wine sitting on the kitchen counter. And when I walked into the bedroom, the bed was clean, made, really tight, needy corners. And anybody that knows Mindy knows Mindy would not have her bed that way. Mindy was a restless sleeper. She never tucked anything in.
Jerry pointed out many things that were unusual in the house.
At that point, we looked in the garage and the car was gone. And I said, Mindy would never drive her car. She lived so close to the airport and there was no reason for her to park in storage. She would always catch a taxi to the airport when she'd leave.
Jerry's intuition was telling her loud and clear.
Things weren't right. And I said, somebody else has done things in here.
Had Mindy opened her door to a ruthless abductor?
She told her friend she felt uncomfortable around him, that she thought he was creepy. And he was actually the last person to see Mindy alive.
52-year-old Anchorage psychiatric nurse Mindy Sloss hasn't been heard from for days.
I felt something horrible and it happened to Mindy. And we just didn't know what.
While the forensic team uses tape lifts to trap evidence left by the one who may have abducted her, Detective Pam Pernew turns her attention to Bob Conway, Mindy's on-again, off-again boyfriend. Could he be responsible for her disappearance?
To try and find out where Bob Conway was for sure, we contacted his place of employment and got his work records, what times he was working.
I wasn't really happy they were looking at me, but I knew they were pursuing every angle, so I guess in a way you're thankful a little bit for that, but...
Detective Pernew is able to confirm that Bob was out of town when Mindy vanished. But might she have been seeing someone else?
Mindy would do online dating, and so occasionally she would have a date through that.
Pernew takes a close look at Mindy's most recent computer activities. Although she finds no evidence of online dating, Pernew can see when Mindy last accessed the internet.
We knew it was Mindy on her computer because we could look to see the different sites that she was going on and sites that were related to nursing. So we could put her at her house on the internet up until 1:30 a.m. on August 4th.
What happened to Mindy after that? In the hopes that someone may have seen her or her vehicle, police distribute photos of both to local TV outlets.
There were a lot of people calling in saying that they had seen Mindy in different places. A Fred Meyer store in Eagle River, some as far away as Texas.
Will any of them turn out to be true?
Detectives were trying to follow up every single tip that came in. So we just needed a lot of people.
Anchorage police appeal to the FBI's special agent, Michael Thorson, for help.
So you have to try to determine maybe did they plan a trip? So taking a look at transactions on the credit card. Did she go to Walmart and buy a tent? Try to identify maybe if she was planning on something and just didn't tell anybody.
But investigators find no indication Mindy had any plans to leave town.
I never thought that she had just gone somewhere else. I didn't know if she was sick or hurt or in the hospital somewhere.
I started thinking in my mind, had she gone out Sunday doing something, walking, hiking, berry picking? If she passed out, the potential is, could have she fallen and hit her head?
Either a bear got her or she was lost or something, so... I immediately contacted some fellow workers that were down in that neighborhood, and they shut the job down and went and combed the whole Seward Highway that very afternoon.
But when they find no sign of her, Bob Conway grows increasingly worried that something sinister has happened to Mindy, and he's determined to find out what.
Drove rivers, looked through ditches, and I looked through dumpsters. It's just horrible.
And while police do a search of Mindy's neighborhood,
I called Mindy's bank and I asked them if there was any unusual activity on Mindy's debit card.
the answer is yes.
There was a large cash withdrawal at an early morning hour, which was not typical for Mindy.
Investigators request the bank's surveillance tape and are distressed to see a masked man accessing her account.
He has a bandana on, has a quilted jacket. He performs a balance inquiry. Then he puts his hand up to his face and pulls down the bandana, just long enough for him to be able to type in, see whatever he needs to see. He can see basically from his nose down to his chin.
Could this split-second glimpse help lead police to the masked man?
And then we see him gets the money, turn around and exit. And at that time, we can definitely see he is wearing a backpack. This is something that we definitely would be able to identify if we can find it again.
Are there other clues the investigators can glean?
On that particular day, being in first part of August, it still would have been 60s in Alaska, and people in Alaska 60s is 100 degrees in Phoenix. And the person had a very large jacket on, would have been described as a winter quilted jacket. Again, trying to hide his body frame.
Who is this man, and what's his involvement in Mindy Sloss's disappearance?
I thought, well, I'll gather Mindy's friends and show them this photo.
When I saw that guy, I got a very sickening feeling. I just got shivers up and down my spine.
But none of Mindy's friends could identify the man. Could Mindy's activities in the days prior to her disappearance offer investigators a clue?
I found out from one of her friends that Mindy was having work done in her home. So she was calling in contractors to give her quotes. Mindy got into an argument with one of the contractors about his price, and she told her friends she felt uncomfortable around him, that she thought he was creepy.
Investigators track the man down, but he comes up clean. Pernue then questions another contractor who'd met with Mindy Sloss the very night she went missing.
It was about 7 p.m. that he was there, and he was extremely nervous about talking to us.
But his story, too, checks out.
We didn't find out anything unusual in his past, and he didn't see anybody else at Mindy's home when he was there.
Will a new ATM video lead investigators to Mindy's real abductor?
Our worst fears were confirmed at that point. I knew that she was probably dead.
It's been 48 hours since Anchorage resident Mindy Sloss was reported missing, and 4 days since anyone has heard from her. Now investigators have learned of a second withdrawal from her bank account made in the early morning hours.
The video was good enough that we can see what appears to be the same exact jacket that he had on the first ATM withdrawal. Again, wearing a bandana, but interesting with that one, looking at the video, we see him, again, perform the balance inquiry. Withdrawal is the maximum amount of $500 that you can do each day, and he walks out. Well, not a few minutes later, he walks back into the lobby, goes back up to the ATM machine.
He looked very agitated, walking around, tugging on the bandana, arranging his clothes.
What could have happened to so upset him?
And so I contacted the security officer for that bank. I asked him to take a look at the machine. He took a look at the machine and found a card. Sure enough, that card belonged to Mindy Sloss.
The man had forgotten the card when he left, and the machine, for security's sake, had swallowed it up again.
So he walked back in, and of course, I'm now thinking he's trying everything he can possibly do. He's frantic at this point because it's not like he can show up at the bank and say, I lost my card, when his name's not Mindy Sloss.
If the first withdrawal hadn't convinced Pam Pernue of Mindy's fate, the second withdrawal has.
I knew that she was probably dead.
Can investigators determine who may have killed her without tipping their hand by releasing their surveillance photo to the general public?
So I went to the bank and I asked for all the transactions before and after his, hoping maybe we might have a witness that saw a car leaving, may be able to give us a good description on a car that we can try to hunt down the possible suspect here.
Will police, for the first time in this investigation, get lucky?
We had a person who, at 4:30 in the morning, he decided that he needed to use the ATM machine. And when he drove up, he saw a man outside. What was interesting is he said this male was on a bicycle.
Might the bike be a clue to the man's identity? Police canvass Mindy's neighborhood again in search of anything that will lead them to her or her abductor.
When was the last time you saw your neighbor, Mindy? What do you know about her? And then asking them, is there a house in the neighborhood that there are problems with?
One house that kept on coming up a little bit strange was the house right next to Mindy Sloss's house.
The neighbors would just say, there are parties all the time. It is a problem house for this neighborhood.
Investigators pay a visit to the home.
There was a number of people living there, younger people, and they didn't want to provide a lot of information.
Pernew then speaks to the woman who lives on the opposite side of the problem house.
I felt that she was holding something back. I thought, you know, she seems like a very good person, and she just isn't answering the question.
Does the woman know something about Mindy's disappearance? And if so, why won't she say?
The next day I got a call from her, and she said that she had more information that she would like to give me, but she did not want me to come to her home, that she was afraid. So I went to meet her at work, and what she told me was that before we got to her house that evening, a man that lived in the house next door came over to her residence. She said that she knew him as Josh. And when he came over, he said to her, the police are in the neighborhood now. And he said, I do not want you to tell them that I live here. And she asked him why. You know, he said because he was on probation and that he did not want to get arrested.
The woman didn't mention him to police that day, but later that night, home alone.
She heard somebody walking around on her porch. So she snuck through the house, went and looked out a window just in time to see Josh. And she said that scared her.
So much so.
She finally relents and tells us his last name. And she says it's Joshua Wade.
I immediately recognized his name.
Joshua Wade is infamous for any law enforcement officer in the state of Alaska because of his acquittal of a murder in which a Alaska native was brutally murdered and beat with a rock to death.
It was a horrible murder.
But because Wade could be charged only with evidence tampering in Della Brown's death,
he had served a very short time in prison and that he had been released. But I was convinced from what I knew that he had murdered Della Brown and gotten away with it.
Even though 12 people said I was not guilty, everybody thinks I'm guilty.
is he also guilty of abducting, maybe even killing Mindy Sloss? Investigators mount an all-out search for the now free 27-year-old.
From the information that we were getting from the roommates, which wasn't much, we didn't think that he had a car. They told us that he traveled mostly by bike or he walked. And they just claimed that they hadn't seen him lately.
Those who have seen him fear he's hiding something terrible, like the mother of Christina Greaser, one of Josh's friends.
My first impression when my daughter walked in with Josh into my home was I was very angry. Given his past history, from what my daughter had told me that he was a neighbor of Mindy's, I felt very nervous, very scared.
I was concerned about him lashing out and doing something to somebody else.
Can scent dogs, despite the odds, track down the could-be killer?
In this case, we were weeks old.
You have traffic, you have cars, you have wind, you have everything that's destroying that scent.
Investigators are distraught to learn that 27-year-old Joshua Wade, acquitted 7 years earlier for the savage murder of Della Brown, is living in the house next door to missing Anchorage nurse Mindy Sloss.
It would have been ridiculous of me to not immediately think that Josh Wade had something to do with Mindy's disappearance.
We need to get him off the street and do what we can to build a case against Joshua Wade.
And on August 9th, 1 week after Mindy Sloss and her vehicle were last seen, police get a call from an observant local truck driver.
And he told me when he was out at the airport, he drove by and he saw the back end of a car that looked like Mindy's to him. And he said, I was gonna just drive on past, but I thought, no, I better back up and take another look. And he backed up and he said he saw the license plate and he said he just started shaking.
Sure enough, it's Mindy's car. And it was very strange because it was approximately about a mile away from the airport.
There would be no reason why Mindy would park her car in that lot if she was going to go on a trip somewhere.
Police on the scene search the car, but find no sign of Mindy.
But we go and we see that there's video cameras there in the parking lot.
So we reviewed the video and we saw what looked to be a man driving Mindy's car in about 12:45 on August 4th, parking the car.
Gets out, shuts the door, looks like he's wiping down the car for fingerprints, and then you see him walking away. As he's walking away, it looks to be a male wearing a backpack. Can't quite determine it, but it sure looks like that same backpack that was used at that first ATM transaction at Wells Fargo.
Is this the man who abducted Mindy? And if it is Josh Wade, had he left any proof of that behind?
We need to do whatever we can to try to determine if there's any evidence in that car.
The crime scene team took swabs from the steering wheel and the gear shift, checking for DNA, and processed the car for fingerprints. Inside the car, there was a shoe impression that was found in dirt, kind of sideways, like someone who was laying in the car.
Investigators are all but certain that passenger was Mindy.
We find Mindy Sloss's purse. I go through the purse. Her ATM card's missing.
In addition to the physical evidence found at the scene, investigators search for the less tangible using a scent transfer machine.
It's a small vacuum cleaner type device. It can collect scent off a hard surface like a steering wheel or the stick shift in the car, places that the individual that was driving Mindy's car would have touched.
The forensic team pays particular attention to the driver's seat.
Because we wanted to isolate scent from the subject versus passengers that had been in the car.
Armed now with the abductor's scent, the FBI calls in the canines.
I was very skeptical of the scent dogs and what they were telling me that they could do.
Including tracking the man who used Mindy Schloss's bank card from this ATM to wherever his scent leads them. Even Michael Thorson is hedging his bets.
Let's go ahead and try, but we weren't holding our breath.
Tracking dogs are typically used immediately after a crime. So for example, in a bank robbery, they're going to follow scent immediately after from that location.
Not only was this trail weeks old,
you have traffic, you have cars, you have wind, you have everything that's destroying that scent. And for that scent to still be on the ground.
The tracking dog was presented with scent at the ATM, and it was a scent taken from Mindy's car.
That dog then walked out, walked down the street, about 3.5 blocks, walked over to Mindy's house.
And went up the front steps of Mindy's house and sniffed at the door handle and on the stairs, and then came down the stairs and went around the fence to the house immediately next to Mindy's house.
The home of investigators' #1 suspect, Josh Wade.
The dog then provides its signal and says, I'm telling you, this is where the scent leads.
I was pretty shocked. The first thing I did was call Detective Pernew on the phone.
When Jolene called me and told me what the dog had done, I couldn't believe it. I wanted to see it for myself.
Pam Pernew will soon get that chance when the FBI lets loose the scent dog at the second location where Mindy's bank card was used.
He crosses one of the major intersections. APD cars are having to race ahead to stop traffic because the dog just doesn't stop. It ends up going almost 3.5 miles through the middle of Anchorage City to Joshua Wade's house.
It was just incredible.
But catching Josh Wade will prove a lot more dangerous than police and the public could imagine.
She said that on the phone, she went through the pictures and she saw a hand holding a gun. So I told her, you need to be very careful because I'm sure he's looking for you.
Armed with a search warrant, investigators are closing in on the home of Josh Wade, their #1 suspect in the abduction and probable murder of Mindy Schloss.
And the SWAT team went into the residence because Josh Wade is obviously considered very dangerous.
Though the search team finds no sign of Josh Wade, they do find evidence they hope will help with the investigators' case.
That included a jacket that appeared to match the jacket that the individual at the ATM wore.
So when I took it over to the lab, They then conducted an examination of the jacket. They found a Credit Union 1 receipt, a $500 withdrawal at the exact same time and place as the ATM withdrawal was done at the Credit Union 1.
I thought it was incredibly stupid that he left the receipt in the jacket that he wore to withdraw Mindy Sloss's money out of her account.
Criminals make mistakes every single day, and that's why law enforcement was able to catch them.
The SWAT team moves on in search of still more evidence of Wade's guilt.
They went into this closet and noticed that there was an attic access. So as one officer is pushing the other officer up into the attic, he scrapes along the wall with his gear.
They saw and heard something fall from the inside door jamb of the closet.
And a watch falls on the ground.
And that happened to be a lady's watch.
But does it belong to Mindy?
As soon as I saw the watch, I called Jerry, Mindy's really good friend. She had described to me before some of the jewelry that Mindy wore.
She's like a nurse like me. We're old school nurses, you know, you always wore a watch.
Jerry told me that she knew the watch was gold. She said that Mindy was very small. She's a very petite woman, and so the circumference of the watch would be really small.
We knew at that point then that Mindy was no longer alive.
But can they finally find her body?
It was very urgent. Pretty soon after that, it was going to start snowing.
And we may never find it at that point.
It's very, very difficult to prosecute somebody for a homicide if you don't have the body of the victim.
Each minute, each day that goes on, evidence can get destroyed.
Is Josh Wade destined to escape a murder conviction, just as he did in the death of Della Brown? Much will depend on the results of the DNA samples taken from the inside of Mindy Schloss's car.
The state of Alaska, through the governor's office, actually put some pressure on to get this DNA done immediately.
When we received the results from the state of Alaska lab, it confirmed that the DNA on the steering wheel was a match to Josh Wade.
We immediately released to the public that we were looking for Josh Wade as a person of interest in the disappearance of Mindy Sloss. There were posters that were made, put all over town.
2 major billboards are placed in Anchorage, providing a reward for his arrest.
Everybody in law enforcement was looking for Josh Wade.
This was one of the biggest manhunts that we've had in Alaska.
And investigators are feeling the pressure.
I was pretty concerned about him lashing out and doing something to somebody else.
There was a lot of fear, a lot of concern that he was out in the community and that we didn't have him arrested.
Police receive hundreds of tips from the public, but Wade continues to elude investigators.
For the next week or so, we were just missing him. It was almost like a cat-and-mouse game.
We were knocking on people's doors that knew him, that were associated with him, and it always seemed that he was here and he was close, but we were just always a couple of minutes behind him.
We released the photograph that we had taken from the bank at the ATM of Josh Wade wearing the hat and the bandana over his face.
Although there is very little of his face visible, one woman is sure she knows him. Her name is Lisa, and she's an old girlfriend of Wade's.
She said that she recognized the person in the ATM photo as Josh, but she wouldn't talk to us again after that.
But there is another woman in Josh Wade's circle looking to come clean, Christina Greaser, who is about to provide police with their most promising tip yet.
She called and she said that she had been driving him around over the past few weeks, and that at some point he left a backpack in her car.
When my daughter informed me that he left the backpack, we both started going through it. There was a lot of bank receipts. There was a cell phone in there.
She said that on the phone, she went through the pictures and she saw a picture of a hand holding a gun. Christina said that she thought that that was Josh Wade's hand and that the gun looked like a gun that she had seen him with.
A Glock 45 caliber handgun. Tina Greaser tells her daughter to contact police immediately.
So she did. She came into the Anchorage Police Department and we got the backpack from her.
But will she help police with their investigation?
What we wanted her to do was to participate in recording conversations between herself and Josh Wade.
Afraid for her life, she refuses to cooperate further.
When Christina stopped working with us, I told her, you need to be very careful. He knows that you have that backpack, and you need to be very careful because I'm sure he's looking for you.
The next thing I knew is my daughter had called me and said, Mom, Josh is outside my house.
Can investigators catch Josh Wade before he kills again?
He was literally moving from one person's house to the next, trying to stay ahead of law enforcement.
The man police believe murdered Mindy Sloss has suddenly appeared at the home of Christina Greaser, demanding she return his backpack.
He had a lot of anger in his voice, and he was also cursing at my daughter at that point.
Wade insists Christina give him a ride somewhere safe from police, but she refuses to help him.
She tried to get him to stick around, but he got suspicious and started walking away.
And what my daughter did is she ended up getting in her vehicle and following Josh through the neighborhood.
She had the direct number of one of the SWAT guys, so she called him directly and said, he's here, I can see him. The officers were close by, so they got into the area.
To their dismay, however, Josh Wade has already found his way into a nearby apartment building.
I drove down the highway basically as fast as is legally possible, and I arrive on the scene where he's at. Police officers are out with their shotguns. Everywhere you walk, there's a police officer. And I speak with the SWAT team leader, who advises that currently he's in negotiations with Josh Wade because there are 2 people that he's holding hostage in this apartment.
All we wanted to do was arrest him so that he couldn't hurt anybody else. So it was very frustrating.
Will the man who has eluded police for weeks surrender? To the investigators' relief,
Wade finally did give himself up. He opened up the door to the apartment. We took custody of him and then escorted him from the apartment to an awaiting police car.
I was very happy, very relieved, and I just wanted to see if we could try and talk to him.
but Wade will be a tough nut to crack.
He knows the system, he knows the game. He has an attitude. I can see he's just gonna tell me that he wants his lawyer and he just wants to go to jail. So, knowing we only have one shot at this, I tell Pam, I said, let's go in.
Hey, Josh. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Pam Pernew with APD.
And we want to let you know what's going on.
We started to tell him why he was under arrest.
You gonna talk with us at all? Or are you just gonna sit there? You gonna do the silent treatment? Do you want to talk with us?
About what?
About what you've been arrested for?
I have no idea what I've been arrested for, man.
You've been arrested for 2 counts of bank fraud, aggravated identity theft, and access device fraud.
He says, well, what do you mean by the device fraud?
What the is that?
That is bank fraud, which means that you used an ATM card of somebody that's not yourself, and that person did not give you permission to do so.
And Josh says, you're assuming that.
You guys assume all this?
No, we don't assume. We have a little bit more than assume. I mean, we actually talked to Mindy, you know.
She told us that you didn't have permission to use her ATM card.
There was that pregnant pause, and he had this, what I call a smirk. He had this little smile on his face.
What did you just say?
And you could see in his eyes, he was reliving what he did.
He knew that we didn't talk to Mindy because he had killed her.
Are you guys trying to play games with me, man?
To me, it said, I got away with it once, and I'm going to get away with it again.
I'm my attorney, dude.
And at that point, we had to terminate the interview. But I had enough to know he killed Mindy.
But without Mindy's body, prosecutors can charge Wade only with bank fraud. Investigators continue the frantic search for their victim.
It's getting cold, leaves are dropping, and we know that if we don't find Mindy's body immediately, the snow will cover it, and it will forever not be found.
6 weeks after Mindy goes missing, and just as it seems Josh is once again about to get away with murder, an electric company employee discovers the remains of a woman in a wooded area more than an hour's drive from Anchorage.
And so myself and the Anchorage Police Department are contacted, and then we go out on scene.
They are horrified to see the body of Mindy Sloss.
Mindy was laying on her back, and she was in the middle of the woods.
I thought how horrifying, how terrified she must have been.
The forensic team does a thorough examination of the scene.
Underneath her head, we found a shell casing. The shell casing was a .45 caliber federal cartridge, same caliber as seen in the hand of Josh.
With a heavy heart, Pam Pernew contacts Bob Conway.
Told Pam, you know, when they did find her, to come to me first. And then I wanted to go see Jerry.
I had a knock on the door, and it was about 11 o'clock at night. It was Bob and Pam there, and seeing them, I knew. Sorry. It was reality at that point. You know, you couldn't convince yourself any other way. They'd found her body.
But can they prove Josh Wade is the one who murdered her?
What we we weren't able to find any evidence that would put Josh at that body site. It's extremely important.
So they wanted to bring the dogs back up so that we could see maybe what path Josh Wade took to take Mindy into the woods.
They take the dogs to a cul-de-sac not far from where Mindy's body was discovered.
It's a location where we assumed the car would have been parked.
They then present the dog with scent taken directly from Josh Wade.
And the dog ran onto the trail that went up to the area where Mindy's body was found and came back out to the road and ran down the road, which would have been the exit that Josh would have made in the vehicle.
A second dog is presented with Mindy Schloss's scent.
The dog tracked from the cul-de-sac area back on the path and directly to where her body was found, and then didn't do anything else. It sat down as if that's the end of the track.
It was eerie. You see, there was 5 or 6 police officers and FBI agents there, and everybody's silent, seeing this dog walk the same path that Mindy walked, and then stops right where she was killed.
Can police convince Josh Wade's brand new bride to help bring him to justice?
She says, I have everything. He confessed to me.
But I do not want to talk to you about what I know.
Investigators on the Mindy Schloss murder are slowly building their case against 27-year-old Josh Wade, who'd escaped justice years earlier for the savage killing of Della Brown.
We can show that Josh used Mindy's ATM card. Josh used her car.
We were able to place Josh Wade at the location where Mindy's body was recovered.
But investigators still have nothing that places Josh Wade at Mindy's home.
We knew that Mindy was in the house on the night that she disappeared and that she was taken from her house. And it was important for us to put him in the house just to complete the picture of what happened.
Will the DNA results from Mindy's home provide police with what they need?
During the first search of Mindy's house, the crime scene team went in and
they used tape lifts to basically lift up everything that was on the floor of her residence.
They literally, using a toothpick and a tweezers, go and pull off every single hair from the tape lifts and go through the vacuum cleaner.
She had a cat, so there was a lot of cat hair on those tape lifts, and I can't imagine being the examiner at the lab.
And determine, was this a cat hair? Was this a human hair? Is this just a fiber?
And then having to microscopically look at them and compare them to Josh Wade's hair to see if there's any connection.
After going through all of that, they were able to find a hair that had Josh Wade's DNA profile.
We now can place Joshua Wade in Mindy's house.
The investigators are thrilled, and on May 18, 2008, 10 months after Mindy's disappearance, Wade is charged with her murder. But do police have a strong enough case to seek the death penalty? The fact that Wade is already in jail helps.
Because he's not trying to convince people not to talk. He's not putting pressure on other people who may be a witness not to say anything to the police.
Or so they think. till they discovered that Josh Wade had reconnected with former girlfriend Lisa, the woman who'd identified him from the ATM photo and could testify to that in court.
After he was arrested, she started visiting him at the jail.
And Joshua then goes and convinces her to marry him.
Which was against jail policy. He was told that he could not do it, but he did. It was so that she would not testify against him, because now she was his wife.
Their jailhouse marriage is declared invalid, but not before investigators have begun to wonder what Lisa knows about Josh that he's so determined to keep secret.
We went to her place of employment and we sat down and talked to her.
She said, yes, she married Joshua Wade, but since that's past, I don't want to have anything to do with him. I'm not going to say anything.
We tried to plead to her sense of responsibility. We talked to her about she was a mom, and what would she do if this was one of her children?
And Lisa still told me that she didn't want to talk.
The following day, however,
I got a phone call from our dispatch center, and they said that there's a lady named Lisa that wanted to talk to me.
She says, I was thinking about what you said, and I want to tell you. She says, I have everything. He confessed to me.
The investigators sit Lisa down for an interview.
She told us that she and Josh had had a conversation in the jail, and that Josh had told her that there was a party that was going on at the house that evening.
She says that Josh, who was flat broke, decided to burglarize the home next door.
He broke in. He said as he was rummaging through her things, Mindy came out of the back bedroom and surprised him.
He says, I'm not going back to jail. I have a witness here that can't be a witness.
Wade makes Mindy lie down on the bathroom floor, and he ties her up. Then
he went home and got his gun, zip ties, the things that he would need to abduct her.
He doesn't want to leave any evidence. He gets some garbage bags. He puts the garbage bags on his feet and he tapes his feet.
And then came back to Mindy still laying on the floor in the bathroom, put her into the car, laid her down in the back seat, and put a blanket over her.
Then drove more than an hour outside of town and forced her to walk into the woods.
He told Mindy that he was gonna let her go. Had her kneel down because he told her that he was gonna cut the restraints off of her.
And then he kills her by pointing the gun and pulling the trigger in the back of her head.
I just thought, what the hell she had to go through. Just a horrible night. And just such an evil guy, how he could do that to anybody.
He made the bed, he vacuumed, he did everything consistent with somebody trying to hide that he was the person responsible for her death.
And in the fall of 2009, 2 years after Mindy's murder, the hearing for Josh Wade gets underway in an Anchorage courtroom. Neither Bob Conway nor the mother of Della Brown miss a day.
I got strength from her, and she probably got some strength from me.
In the hopes of bringing closure to the friends and family of both victims,
we told Wade that if he confessed to killing Mindy Sloss, and he also accepted responsibility for the death of Della Brown, that we would take the death penalty off the table.
To the relief of Della Brown's mother, Wade agrees to the plea deal.
Well, the important thing was that she finally got him to admit that, that he did kill her daughter. And it was a huge relief to her. I could see that. It was big for both of us.
Accordingly, I sentence Mr. Wade to a term of 99 years without the possibility of ever being released for the remainder of his natural life.
It was a relief to know that, hopefully it's bringing some peace to Mindy, knowing that that guy's off the street. And that, hopefully the world's a little safer.
Definite sense of satisfaction that we were able to get Joshua Wade away. And that satisfaction goes both to Della Brown and to Mindy Sloss.
I felt that it was justice for both of them to make sure that he never, ever be outside of jail again.
For more information, go to ownca.oprah.com/murdershesolved.